Hi, Melza. I just wanted to post this response to your video. Um, I think you were right. I agree with you in principle, but also I think you were wrong. And the reason for that is I think you're reacting to a stance that Pat Conlon's taking. And that stance is because, as I'm sure you know, you must watch TV. In Britain, there's this group of fascist extremists who are appearing on TV. In particular, I must mention Amit Chowdhury. Um, he appears on TV and he promotes and instigates cultural prejudice and hatred, and it's not just against one particular group of people. He instigates hatred and even violence, and he supports acts of terrorism against all non-Muslims. Now, this guy is a fascist. He is hate-filled. Uh, he is irrational. He should not be allowed on TV in Britain or anywhere else. In fact, I believe that British laws, under those laws, he should have been prosecuted already. And one thing I really don't understand is why he's tolerated. I know he lives on welfare. He lives on welfare in Britain, and Britain tolerates him on TV, spouting hatred and saying he's going to overthrow the state. What is going on? So I believe it's exactly this that Pat is responding to. And I might not agree with insulting people's faith, but when you consider that here you have this group of fascists saying they will overthrow um, Britain, they will overthrow the democratic states in Europe, they'll overthrow the democratic state of America, and remove all of our freedoms and our freedom of speech. And they are saying they want to oppress us and subject us to their barbaric laws. So here you have this barbaric medieval mindset that believes in oppression, violence, misogynism, and torture, and, and execution, and generally atrocity in the name of their faith to assert world dominance. And this group set themselves against our Western democracies, which have evolved to be what they are today through a process of social evolution and political evolution which has taken place over many decades and hundreds of years. And people have even given their lives for this, to improve the conditions they lived under and for the rest of us, so that today we have a modern civilized democracy in which we believe in and uphold people's rights to not be subject to such barbaric and prejudicial laws, to not be tortured, to not be prejudiced against. So is it surprising people who support that are insulted by the attacks, the publicized attacks by these fascist groups? Also bearing in mind what happened some 60, 70 years ago when a fascist group in Germany managed to take control of that country and cause a war that lasted nearly a decade, resulting in millions of deaths. And also, we know from the past, just look at medieval Europe and present day, look at what happens in some of those Islamic countries. This is what happens when you have a country ruled under a theocracy. And that is something we never want to return. And it's why here in the West, our societies are secular, and they are constructed in such a way to prevent a theocracy from ever getting into power again, because we acknowledge what happened in the past. So with all this going on, it's not surprising people will be offended. And also, there will always be a reaction. Faith is pretty emotive. But also, we do need people to stand up and oppose this. And in fact, the situation has gone so far that although I have Muslim friends who oppose what Chowdhury says, they are afraid to appear here with me on video and state their views, because they are now they are now afraid that they would suffer reprisals, that they would be subject to violence, attempts on their lives, and so on. That is how far it's gone. So long as Pat makes people think, doesn't really matter if he says he feels he has the right to insult. Really, the right he has is to criticize. But that simple act of criticizing, these people are going to feel insulted anyway. They seem to be insulted by any criticism of their faith. And as a contrast, I would say this to you. I've had many conversations with Christians. I've criticized what they believe. They sat there and discussed it with me in a civil manner, as should always be the case. And even if I were insulted, what do you think they'd do? Would they threaten to kill me? Would they threaten me with violence? Of course not. They'd just say to themselves, this guy's being insulting, is just being nasty, I'm not going to listen to him anymore. And that is a rational and balanced reaction. And that is really how Muslims should behave when their faith is criticized, or even if people insult it. To react with violence or threats of violence or death threats just shows how irrational and unbalanced they are. And that is why we have to oppose them. So generally, I support what Pat is doing and what he says. Okay, even if I don't agree people should be insulted. Somebody, and I hope now many people are doing so, and if you watch the news or read about it, you see that more and more people are. This movement, this fascist, organized movement that is putting the rest of the Muslims, who may be moderate, in fear, has to be opposed and needs to be stopped before it goes too far. So let Pat say what he has to say, and look past when he says he has a right to insult him, which I think is really just a reaction to the fact that Muslims claim they are so insulted by criticism. Look past that and look at the central issues of what he says, because that is what we here in the West, America, Britain, the rest of Europe, that is what we need to support. Okay. Have a pleasant evening.